All right, guys. So we're continuing on with the component. There's the third module on endurance adaptations. And so again, what we're talking about is we've talked about the central component of endurance, where we're going to increase VO2 max by increasing cardiac output. We've also talked about the peripheral adaptations, increase in blood vessels or angiogenesis, increase in mitochondrial mass or mitochondrial biogenesis, and increase in fatty acid oxidation enzymes. We also increase the ability to use glucose as a fuel. And so all of those things are going to be endurance adaptations that we're going to start to talk about as far as how do we drive the endurance adaptations in the peripheral tissues, such as muscle. So by the end of this series of videos, you should be able to name the 3 optimal zones for generating endurance adaptations. And that's going to help you do your training. Remember, you're still trying to train at least 3 days a week for this 2-mile challenge that we have going on. So if you want to improve your 2-mile performance as best as you can, how long are the interval periods that you should be training for? How long should you be running for? What are the optimal ways to do this in the highest efficiency manner? You should be able to name or identify a family of signaling molecules that are activated by calcium. Explain the effect of CAM kinase, which is this signaling molecule that's activated by calcium, on mitochondrial mass. You should be able to draw what the AMP activated protein kinase looks like. Label its domains. It's 3 proteins. You should be able to describe how it's activated. Discuss the effect of exercise intensity on AMP kinase activity. Identify a nutritional intervention that activates AMP kinase. Define this protein deacetylase called sirtuin-1 or SIRT1. You should be able to discuss the effect of exercise intensity on SIRT1 activity, and you should be able to demonstrate the effect of SIRT1 on mitochondrial mass. So we talked about the peripheral adaptations. Let's go back in time to 1967 when John Halsey showed for the first time that endurance exercise actually was good for you. Because Halsey was a cardiologist. So he had trained as a cardiologist, trained as a medical doctor, not as a scientist. And basically what he had been seeing is this chest x-ray studies had shown that, people with cardiovascular disease where you have failing hearts, they have a big heart on chest x-ray. When I look at runners or I look at endurance athletes, they also have a big heart. So is it good for you to exercise or is it bad for you? And he was convinced it was good for you, but he was also convinced that you couldn't get the data in humans necessary to figure this out. So what he did is he did a study where he ran rats for 12 weeks. And then he was able to collect the muscles and he was able to measure their performance. And then he was able to, after they had done their performance, he was able to collect the muscles and then measure specific things. The first thing he measured was oxygen uptake. So this idea of VO2 max is how much oxygen we deliver to the peripheral tissues. So is the adaptation we're making in the periphery, is it substantial? Is it significant? And what he found is that when he ground up the calf muscles from sedentary mice, in this case rats, what he did is he found that they used 502 microliters of oxygen per hour per gram of protein that he added. When he did this from muscles from exercised animals that ran for 12 weeks, what he found is he doubled the ability of that muscle to use oxygen. So it took up one milliliter of oxygen per hour per gram of tissue. And so now what you've got is you've got this effect where the exercise increased the oxygen uptake capacity by a factor of 2. So you doubled oxygen uptake. So now the important question is, because you remember how you're using oxygen to generate ATP, is you use the electron transport to generate this current because you're transporting hydrogen ions across this mitochondrial membrane that's impermeable to hydrogen. So there's 2 ways that you can increase oxygen uptake. Is it because you've uncoupled the hydrogen ion gradient with ATP production, and as a result, for the same amount of oxygen, to produce the same amount of energy, you need a lot more oxygen? Or is it that you actually are producing the same amount of ATP relative to the amount of oxygen, and you're just able to produce twice as much ATP. So he measured what's called the ATP to oxygen ratio, so the P to O ratio, and he showed that you're producing the same amount of ATP per unit of oxygen. You're using twice as much oxygen. That means your muscle is able to produce twice as much ATP. All right. So why is your muscle able to use twice as much ATP? Well, when he took the calf muscle from the sedentary and the exercised animals, and he measured directly the activity of these two enzymes in the mitochondria, cytochrome oxidase and succinate oxidase, what he found is that those enzymes, the activity of those enzymes, they increased almost twice as much as well. And so what he found is that 12 weeks of running doubled mitochondrial enzymes, and the peripheral adaptation was about a twofold increase in the ability to use oxygen to produce ATP. Mind you, there was a sixfold increase in the time to exhaustion. So again, big increase in the central delivery of oxygen, but there's also this nice doubling of the ability of the muscle to use the oxygen that's being delivered to it. He did continue to study this. When I was in his laboratory around the year 2000, he'd been going for 30 years. By the time he finished in 2007, it'd been 40 years since his first study, 40 years of studying this at a very high level. He was awarded with this, which is the IOC, International Olympic Committee's Scientific Award for Excellence. And basically that got him this gold medal, which is 2.2 pounds of gold. So that's 1 kilo of gold. He was able to go to the Melbourne Olympics, and he was able to carry the torch on the torch run, get into any event that he actually wanted to. Actually, it wasn't the Melbourne. That would have been a long time ago. It was the Sydney Olympics. And so basically, he got full access to any training session, any competition, anything that he wanted to go to. And he did this. It's the greatest award for scientific achievement because you get to do the thing you really want to do anyways, which is you get to go, you win a Nobel, you get to go to Sweden and meet the king. Not really any great desire to meet a king, but hell, I'd love to go to the Olympics and watch any athletic event that I want, watch anybody train, do anything and have full access. That's the kind of award that I'm looking for. Anyway, so he won that award because of a career that started with this first study showing that when you do exercise, you increase mitochondrial enzymes and the ability to use oxygen to produce ATP.